Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. Got a fun show for you today. We're doing our 7th annual regular season schedule prediction show this week, and Keith's brought in his predictions. I've brought in mine. We're going to see how they compare, and it should be a fun show, kind of a look ahead to what we think the Seahawks are going to do record-wise in the regular season. How you doing, Keith?
I'm doing good. Just got back from a beach trip, so I'm feeling great, and we're about to start regular season football, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, we're less than a week away from kickoff against the Los Angeles Rams at home, and that's kind of a good game to warm up with, I think. Looking at the Rams, as far as their roster, it looks to me like it's a fairly poor roster. It has very little depth. They've got issues kind of all over the place. Early in the offseason, I saw some predictions where they had the Rams competing, in a three-way race for the division title. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? And lately, I've been just looking at some of what other people are saying about the Rams out there. And It's not good. I mean, we're talking like a bottom, 3-4 team in the NFL. So where are you at on Seattle's roster? Let's start the conversation there, and then let's get into that first game against the Rams and give me your prediction.
So I think Seattle's roster is decent. It's good in a lot of places. It's actually really good and deep in some places, but not on the defensive line. I think the defensive line leaves a lot to be desired. And both in terms of quality and depth. And I think that is going to end up being the one sticking point that stops this team from, being a championship contender. But I do think they're a playoff team. So once you get there, who knows, right? You just string together a couple of really good games and play well, and you can make it happen. So we've seen other teams do that where they're, don't look that good, but then they just get hot at the right time. So The key is getting into the tournament. And I think that Seattle seems pretty well destined to do that. But I don't know if that defensive line depth is going to hurt them enough to make them so they're not true contenders.
That seems to be fair. I mean, that's certainly fair going into the season when we haven't seen anything yet. A bit of skepticism, I think, is warranted. The team revamped the entire defensive line, save for Miles Adams, essentially, and everyone else on the roster currently in the front seven is new to the team, but not necessarily perceived to be brought in to specifically stop the run. Most of the guys that we have on that front line are pass rush guys that can get after it from the middle. Mario Edwards is probably more of an edge-setting defensive end in a traditional sense. Jerron Reed has always been a guy that could kind of penetrate the pocket a little bit. He's known for stopping the run. It's not his optimal usage. Cameron Young is a guy that potentially could stop the run pretty well, but we don't know really anything about him. I don't even know where his current weight is. There really hasn't been a lot out about him. He's missed the entire preseason. He's on the roster. He's practicing now. We'll see how that goes. Dre Jones was brought in on a mega deal to come in and essentially play the 3-tech for Seattle. And he's really good at that. But is he going to be a great edge guy defending the run? I don't know yet. He's got mixed results on that as far as his statistical performances so far in his career. And the team seems high on this whole way that they've constructed this. Like, we've been pretty much kind of questioning this methodology since February, as far as how the team was put together, what they did in the draft, how they addressed things in the offseason in general. And it seems like we're still talking about the same things and the same issues. We've gone through 3 preseason games. No answers have really been given. They did pretty decent against the run in preseason, but the preseason now is to a point where starters barely play. And so we really don't know how this team is going to do. It's all talk right now. Jerron Reed's coming out, and, in the latest press conference that he had, and said, there's no way we're going to be as bad as we were last year. And, we're going to show you guys blah, 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 blah. So it's all talk right now. Let's get into the first game. Let's find out what we've got against the Rams. A team that wants to surprise people, but again, I think it's a rebuilding roster, maybe on its way down. As soon as Matthew Stafford leaves, they're going to be looking for a quarterback of the future. And he's already kind of a diminishing returns kind of a guy. And, I see Seattle over them pretty easily at home in their first game.
Yeah, I've also got that as a win. I think that, you've got a few pieces on the Rams, like Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, but it looks like Cooper Kupp might not play, and their offensive line looks terrible. And I think this one should be a relatively easy win for the Seahawks.
Yeah, and it should be a fun way to open the season. You're at home. It's against the Rams, kind of perceived, at least from my perspective, kind of a bottom 5 team in the NFL, and it should come easily. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do throughout this entire program probably is take a look at the quarterbacks. Like, who are we facing? That seems to be one of the easiest ways to kind of tell as far as how teams that we're facing are gonna do. Do they have a great quarterback? Is he a franchise guy? Do they have an offense that's built around him? I just don't know about Matthew Stafford. The offense seems to be kind of up in the air a little bit. Cooper Kupp's now injured. He's got some things. He's getting reevaluated. He's probably not going to play. There's really nobody else, on their roster that scares me at all on the offensive side. You've got Aaron Donald on the other side. He's only one guy, though. That's it. That's their team.
Yep.
All right.
Week 2, we have the Seahawks at Detroit. The Detroit is a pretty good team. So this was a game that I'm a little concerned about, but I do think that Seattle has talent in the right spots to beat Detroit. I think Detroit's going to win a lot of games. They're going to be a playoff team right there with Seattle. But I do think that when it comes down to it, you've got it's just a matchup that I think Seattle matches up well with. Their strengths are in the right spot to stop Detroit. So I have that down as a win.
Yeah, I do too, for the similar reasons. And, this is going to be one of those early games in the season that's going to give a pretty decent window as to where Seattle's at currently against other good competitive teams. Detroit's going to be right there with them. I think, Seattle, you could argue, is going to be anywhere from between 10 and 12 wins for, between the both of us, and others that are kind of projecting these things. I think Detroit's kind of right in that same window. Maybe that's a little generous for them on the top end, but they're going to be, the 7th seed, I think, out of the NFC. That's my prediction for them. And this is going to be an interesting game. David Montgomery, their running back, I like a lot. I think he's underrated. They got Jamari Gibbs in the draft. They've got some good receivers. Their defense is well put together, and they're very well coached. And we saw what happened last year. It was a shootout. I don't see necessarily a shootout again, but Seattle's going to be scoring a lot of points almost against everybody. And teams are going to have to kind of keep up with that. So there's going to be a lot of pressure for Detroit to kind of go for it on 3rd, 4th down. And Jared Goff's just maybe not the best equipped quarterback to be able to do that, to be in a shootout. We saw it last year, but I don't know if it can be repeated. So I do see it as a win.
Okay, so we're in agreement so far, 2-0. So for Carolina at home, week 3, Carolina is a team that is rebuilding. This should be a easy, walk away win for the Seahawks.
It's an exciting game, though, with Bryce Young coming in. I think they're well coached with Frank Reich. It is kind of one of those teams, Evero is their defensive coordinator, was at Denver. I kind of like this team. I like the roster. I just don't think that they're going to be a playoff team. But it's going to be a team. I think it's going to surprise some people. This is one of those games where you don't want to go into the game thinking you're going to win. I think Seattle needs to pull out all the stops and put this team away early to make sure that they don't have a chance. So, but I do have it as a win as well. So here we are, 3-0.
3-0. Good start.
For sure.
So, week 4 on the road against the Giants. Giants are a good team, a pretty well coached team now. I don't like their quarterback, but the rest of their roster is pretty damn good. And I think the Giants are going to be a playoff team this year. I actually have this one going as a loss for Seattle.
Wow. I do not. This is where we diverge. Brian, everyone loves Brian DeBall as a coach. I think he is a good coach, but I'm not going to crown him like NFC champion, right off the bat. I think Seattle goes in and takes care of business on this game, to be completely honest. I don't like Daniel Jones, but he somehow produces as far as the stats. He's unproven as far as being a guy that you give the ball with 2 minutes to go, down 3 points, and goes get you a touchdown. I don't know if he's that guy yet. Geno Smith, I think he showed us last year that he'd come back and win games. He put us in position to win games several different times, not just putting us over the top, but holding a lead. And I think Seattle just outscores this team. Just to be completely honest, I think their defense is legit, but I think Seattle is so diverse in the way that it can score that I just don't see this defense overcoming that, and I don't see their offense being good enough to keep up, and that's why I've got Seattle as a win.
Yeah, I have this. Part of the reason why I think this is a struggle for Seattle is simply because the Giants are going to be one of the best running teams in the NFL, both with Saquon Barkley and a quarterback that can beat you with his legs, even though he might not be the most polished passer. And I think Seattle's defensive weakness is going to be against the run simply because of the defensive line. So I think this is a team that Seattle's good enough to beat, but I think it just like earlier with the Detroit game where I said it just matches up really well for Seattle, I think this one doesn't match up really well for Seattle. That's more of why I've got that as a loss.
So one of your favorite players out of the draft, John Michael Smith, is their starting center now, and Mark Lewinsky, old Seahawks guard, is there starting at the right guard. Evan Neal is over there at right tackle. Andrew Thomas is at left tackle. They've got a nice line, some good, decent young receivers, and then Daniel Jones. And Saquon Barkley had a great year last year. Their defense is really nice. I like their defense. I think we beat them last year, right? At home.
Yeah.
I think we go and beat them again. So, okay. So I start getting to the bye week now. I have the Seahawks at 4-0. You have them at 3-1. Nonetheless, good records, both of us heading into the bye week, week 5. It's early bye week this year.
Too early.
Little too early. You'd like to have that, week 7, week 8, but what are you going to do? Seahawks come back from the bye, and we visit the Cincinnati Bengals 10:00 game. This is to me the biggest challenge, obviously, I think so far in the season, on the road against a playoff team, a Super Bowl team from 2 years ago, a team that wants to get back there, a very challenging endeavor in the AFC, where you've got a group of like 5 or 6 teams that'll all be competitive, could get to that AFC championship game along with maybe Kansas City. And this is definitely one of those teams. I've got this down as the first loss of the season.
I also have them down as a lot. I think Cincinnati is one of the class teams of the entire NFL, and being on the road against a really good team, I think that. I think Seattle can keep it competitive and all of that. I'm not predicting a blowout or anything crazy like that. I just think that Cincinnati is just a really good team, and you have to go onto the road to play them. It's hard to win in that environment, so I've got it as a loss.
Yeah, interesting. This is about as close as a gimme as you can get in the NFL these days, and it's the Cardinals against the Seahawks, Week 7 at Seattle, and the Cardinals are going to be awful. The quarterback intrigue there with Joshua Dobbs probably earning the starting job. They haven't announced the starting quarterback yet. It's either going to be Clayton Tune or Josh Dobbs. I think Josh Dobbs gets it. They traded for him just a few weeks ago from Cleveland. I've seen him when he was with Pittsburgh. I watched a couple different games that he was in, and he's a nice quarterback. He'll remind people of Kyler Murray, only 3 or 4 inches taller, a little bit skinnier, not quite as stout, but he's got real athletic upside. He can run the ball on you. He can extend drives, etc. Now the question is, what do they have around him to help him at all? Not much. It's a really poor roster if I've ever seen one. Like it's just void of talent.
Oh yeah,
and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, that roster is bad, and they're probably going to have the first overall pick in the draft, and maybe another pick in the top 3 or 4,
right?
Because of the really idiotic trade the Houston Texans made with them. Great for Arizona, but yeah, you got a bad Arizona roster that should get better quickly after this year because of the draft assets they added. But that's got to be an easy win.
Yeah, Arizona has done a good job. Their new GM has done a great. I can't pronounce his name. Has done a great job on starting the rebuild. They started it this year. Kyler Murray is going to probably not play this year. They've got him on IR with a designation to return. However, it's unlikely that he returns prior to Week 10, and he could be shut down by then. If the team's like 0-10, 0-12 by the time he's set to return, there's no reason that you would put him on the field with that sort of a team. And the only reason why he's played his last down in Arizona. The
only reason why you might is to showcase that, hey, he's back, he's healthy, he can still do some good things. So maybe you want to trade for him.
The reason that you
in the coming off season,
the reason that you wouldn't do that is there's some injury clauses in his contract, Keith. That if he is injured and misses again the rest of the season after he comes back, he would be guaranteed salaries all the way through 2026, I believe.
Yeah. In that case, you sit him.
Yeah. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for him to play, and he probably won't. And if he doesn't see the field this year, I think that he's seen his last snap in Arizona. I think they're ready to move on. If they draft first, it's going to be the kid Williams from USC, excuse me. And that's going to be the direction the franchise goes. And I think it's probably the best because you've got a new coach, you've got a new GM, and Kyler Murray kind of wore out his welcome a little bit before he was injured. And now that he is injured, it's convenient to move on, and I think they do. But anyway, I've got this down for a win. You do too. Let's go to the next game. The Cleveland Browns visit Lumen Field against the Seahawks in Week 8.
Yeah, I have this as a win. I don't think Cleveland is as good as everyone wants them to be. Yeah, I think
And
Deshaun
that's been the
Watson
trend for a long time.
is. I think Deshaun Watson plays better this year than he did last year. Where last year he, with the suspension and all of that, it was a struggle. But he was a top five quarterback at one point. It's been 3 years, but he's still a young guy. I think he rounds into form and helps this team, but I think the rest of the roster has deteriorated around him. Um, and so therefore, I don't think they're that strong, especially
I
not
disagree. I
really.
think if this team was in the NFC, this would be a playoff team. This would be similar to like the level of the Lions for me. A team that could be 9 or 10 wins in the NFC. Now in the AFC, in their own division, it's going to be hard to win in their own division. It's going to be hard to make the playoffs in the AFC, and this is one of the teams I think is outside looking in when it's all said and done. But their roster's pretty good, Keith. They've got great running back in Nick Chubb. Deshaun Watson comes back for a full season. He's kind of ready to go. Their tight end Njoku is excellent. Their offensive line is good. Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, along with Elijah Moore at wide receiver. Their Zachariah Smith and Dalvin Tomlinson and Shelby Harris and Myles Garrett on the defensive line. Their safeties are excellent with Grant Delpit and Juwan Thornhill, Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward at corner. And I think that roster is going to win a lot of games. Now, this game will be more competitive, I think, than you've indicated. But I do have it as a win, just because I think Seattle's entering its stride, and this is the time of the season where they really need to pile up the wins because they have a stretch later on we'll talk about that's going to be pretty significant struggle to win games. And if they want to reach their goals and get into the playoffs this year, they've got to win a pretty decent chunk of games here in the next 5 or 6. And this is one of them. So I got this as a win.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. On the road at Baltimore. Is Lamar Jackson healthy is the question I have for that game, because I think that this is a team that will win a ton of games when he's healthy and will struggle when he's not. It's early enough in the year. I've got him as healthy, and so I've got him that as a loss for Seattle.
Interesting. That is a good barometer. Is Lamar Jackson healthy? This is one of those quarterbacks I think that can be frustrating to any team when he's really healthy. I think they pare back the athleticism a little bit and have him throw a little bit more this year, just to kind of help him settle into kind of being more of a, I don't want to say pocket passer, but they're going to try to get the ball out a little quick so he doesn't feel like he needs to run all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read that, and it seems like they've added some weapons for him to be able to do that. Zay Flowers was in the draft, Odell Beckham Jr. Their offensive line is decent. J.K. Dobbs and Gus Edwards running the ball, along with that threat all the time with Lamar Jackson. And their defense is pretty decent. I've got it down as a loss. I would love Seattle to pick this up. This is one of those games that you could win on the road. Everything goes your way. Seattle's going to be scoring points. Can their offense score as many as our offense? That might be what it comes down to. But I've got it as a loss.
Yeah, the fact that I think they needed to add like a legitimate deep threat in order to truly open that offense up. But I'd also think they didn't on purpose because they didn't want Lamar back there waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for someone to get open deep. So
We'll see how Beckham does. And Zay Flowers is a speedster. Now he's going to be more of an underneath guy.
he's more of
But
an underneath guy.
He can kind of threaten you over the top. He's definitely got the 3.35 speed or something like that. So halfway through the season, halfway through the predictions, I've got him down as 2 losses. You're at 3 so far.
I'm at 4.
You're at 4.
No, wait. I'm at 3. Yeah, I'm at 3.
Okay.
I can read my
So
own handwriting. Yes,
the
yes.
next game is the Washington Commanders at Seahawks on November 12th, week 10.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this as a win. This is a quarterback challenge for me, and Sam Howell is the quarterback. And I just think, they're kind of an up and coming team. They want to be kind of an up and coming team, but they haven't yet, to me, found their quarterback. They believe in Sam Howell, but we'll see. I think they go as far as Sam Howell goes with them. The rest of their roster is okay. It's like an 8-win team to me. That's
I think
similar to
if they had
last
a
year.
legit quarterback, I think they could be a 10-win team. The roster is not bad.
Mhm.
I think the roster is actually pretty good, especially defensively.
And you
But
can say
yeah,
that about 10 teams in the NFL, though. And this is one of those
yeah,
where
they
it's just,
they they just don't have a quarterback, and
they think they do, though. They
I
think they
think
do.
they've got a quarterback that will manage a game for them. But can they go out and win a game? Can you know can they go out and put together a couple of drives at the end of a game to try and come back and win against Seattle? Keep the ball out of Geno Smith's hands, and march down the field and get it scored back to back drives at the end of the game to get that win. I don't think he's that guy. And so yeah, uh, I I I just think that that's a as I think that's going to be a win for Seattle, and I just don't. I think Washington made a mistake by not securing a better quarterback play. Even if they wanted to go with Howell, they needed a backup, someone that they trusted to come in if Howell falls on his face.
Interesting. So I've got them at 7-2. You've got them at 6-3 so far at this point. The interesting thing about the Commanders, and good for Cody Barton, he's their starting middle linebacker, which is amazing for him. Okay, so the next game. This is where the season gets interesting. Not this particular game, but this is kind of where the season gets interesting. And what kind of team we have. Like if we happen to be my record at 7-2, this team could depending on how this next stretch goes, could be in contention to have a home playoff game and potentially a bye. I mean, 7-2 record is going to be pretty good. They play the Rams next at the Rams. We've already faced them once. It's hard anytime you're playing two games against the same opponent in a year. Those games are hard, but this one against the Rams, come on.
Yeah, especially at this point of the year, that it's still an old roster, and we saw last year they've had incredible injury luck in the recent past until last year. Finally, all their old veterans started breaking down and started having injuries. And you're far enough along in the season, you don't have any depth, which they don't have, and you got an old roster. Guys are going to start getting hurt. I think they have reached a point where they just aren't a competitive team. By this point in the year, I think that's a pretty easy win for Seattle.
And they're playing for a draft.
Yeah, they're in the Drake May or Caleb Williams sweepstakes by this point.
Okay, so I think absolutely positively now you will agree with me that this next 4 games is the tell for the entire season.
These next 4 games will make or break the season. Because it will determine whether the team is a wild card team or whether they win the division and have a home playoff game, or possibly even get the number 1 overall seed and have a bye and home field advantage throughout. So it really comes down to these next 4 games. Unfortunately, you're going to find that my predictions are not they're not great. They're not great results for Seattle over these next 4 games.
And let me tell you this, you'll be lucky that I added up all the wins early, because this next stretch is truly brutal. It really is. All right,
but
I do have a surprise.
Against San Francisco.
I do have a surprise, though, against this team this week. Thanksgiving evening, 5:20. That's going to be a great game. I just say it right now. 49ers at Seahawks. I mean, this is the game you circle early, like right now. All the players have like circled this game as like this is the defining moment for this team, and it is. It's going to be one of those games where I think the season, if you are successful up until this point, this is a game that you want to get. You want to be able to have your team defined by a win here, not a loss. And I've got it as a win. At home, it's one of those games. It's Thursday night, Thanksgiving. It's a team that Pete Carroll will have these guys ready to play.
Yep.
So
I think that when you get these Thursday night games, there's not a lot of game planning that goes on. There's very little practice. It comes down to who's rolling and who just has the bigger, more physical team. And I think that, Kyle Shanahan is a fantastic coach who can scheme up victories against anyone. But when you can't game plan and you're forced to just go out and do what you do, I don't know if he can will Brock Purdy and company to having a team that's good enough to beat Seattle. Although Seattle's weakness is against the run, and they will run the ball well. But I have this as kind of a surprise win along with you.
Wow. Yeah, this is the kind of, you're right. This is the kind of game where your leaders take over on the team. Guys like Geno Smith, guys like Bobby Wagner, guys like Diggs are going to be instrumental in pulling this off. Because I think those guys know how important this game is going to be, and they'll have everyone ready to play. Fun game though. Fun game. It does matter what the outcome is, but no matter the outcome, I think this is going to be a tremendous fun game. Okay. The next game is tough too.
At on the road against Dallas.
Again, a Thursday, so a week in between, which is fine. That's as good as you can hope for.
Yeah, the back-to-back Thursdays is interesting. Dallas also has back-to-back Thursdays.
Yeah.
So this Thursday night game is essentially a normal schedule for both teams because you had that short week to a Thursday and then a full 7 days to another Thursday.
And then essentially a bye, in between too, because you don't play until the following Sunday. Yeah, this is a game on the road, Keith, against the Cowboys, who by all accounts have the world's greatest roster again this year, and they're destined to challenge Philadelphia for the division and the NFC for the NFC title. Tell me that you don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that because I never agree with that. Dallas is never as good as the media wants them to be every single year, but I do think this is a good roster overall. I do. I like their defense. I think that they got out from underneath that Ezekiel Elliott contract. They've kind of reloaded a little bit. In terms of their weapons, like I said, I like their defense. I think this is a team that, if it can stay healthy, can be really good. That doesn't make them the world beaters that ESPN wants them to be, but I do think they're good. I've actually got this as a loss. I think that this is a game on the road. They come off an emotional win against the 49ers. That means a lot. That was like they knew they had to get that win. They went and got that one, and there's a little bit of a letdown on the road against Dallas. I have this one as a loss.
I have this one as a loss too, and I hated it. I hated every second of it because I've always been a guy that's been like, oh, don't give Dallas that credit because they haven't really done anything. And they haven't, but they've got a decent roster. I'm not going to say it's great. I'm not going to say they're going to finish their division first or be in contention for the NFC, but this is a 10-win team. Could be even better, could be worse, depending on Dak Prescott. I just think that for everything that you said, the emotional letdown thing is a factor. It's on Thursday night though. We kind of get up for those nationally televised games. I think it's going to be close. I think we walk out with a disappointment. If we end up getting the win, there the season's going to end up being great, I think, because this is one of those games you can toss. It's kind of a toss-up category for me. That and like the Ravens game, you come away with wins on those kind of games, and pretty soon this season turns into something special as opposed to something that's just really good and average. But yeah, I got this as a loss.
All right. So then, with just the Dallas game between, now they're back against the 49ers, this time on the road, as the third game of this 4-game stretch. That's brutal. I don't think they beat the 49ers twice. And this year, I think that them getting that first win is kind of the upset. The 49ers have a really nice roster. They do. And
is Purdy going to be the guy that can take them? And can he beat the Seahawks? He showed last year he could.
Yeah. I mean, he can. He's shown that he can do it. And a lot of it is the offense that they run and the coach that they have. You're not, you don't need Joe Montana for this offense to work, right? You need someone who just does all the little things well, the making the right reads, getting the ball accurately to a player. You don't have to make you don't have to be throwing dimes out there. You don't have to have the huge arm. You don't have to do all those things. You've just got to be steady in order to make this offense work. I think Brock Purdy is great for this offense. And I hate to say that because I'd rather the 49ers be a team Seattle beats regularly, but I have this as a loss. I just think the 49ers roster top to bottom is really good.
Yeah. So everything you just said applies to the next team that we're going to talk about. The Philadelphia Eagles.
Except for they're better.
Seattle Seahawks, week 15. Now talk about a defining game. You want to go up against the best? This is the best. This is the best team in the NFC. This is the team that everyone's going to be gunning for. They come into town. We've both got really pretty decent records so far in our predictions. What happens, Keith, in this game?
I have this as a loss. I know that Philly won't be quite as good as they were last year simply because they've lost some depth. They've lost some good players. It's what happens when you're a Super Bowl team, whether you win or lose. You end up having your players be coveted by other teams. So they've lost some depth. They've lost some guys, but they loaded up in the draft pretty damn well. And I think that the Philadelphia Eagles are the class of the NFC this year. I think that they have the best roster. And I think that their quarterback situation with Jalen Hurts is not the problem that we kind of thought it might be before last season. He really showed that he's not just a running quarterback, that he can run their whole offense and do everything. I think the Eagles are the best team. They're the number 1 seed coming out of out of the NFC this year, and so I have it as a loss.
Wow. Yeah, I've got it as a loss. Third loss in a row. Same with you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Third loss in a row, and that stings this time of the year. That's a gauntlet of a schedule. San Francisco, then the Cowboys, then San Francisco again, then the Eagles. That will help define this season. If they win a bunch of games prior to that, maybe they can afford to drop some of these games. I'll show that in my end results. Losing these 3 games, in your schedule, you've already got a couple more losses than I do, or one, really hurts. Like it goes from contending in the division to wild card is basically what happens in this stretch. Mm-hmm. And I've got them as 3 losses as you do too. So, and if we happen to drop that Thursday night Thanksgiving game against the 49ers,
There's
It
four straight losses.
gets even worse. Now
And then it
you
feels like the
could.
wheels are coming off.
It does feel like that. You've lost momentum. You've lost a month worth of games potentially right here. It's huge. That's huge for your team, your psychology, your momentum. But can they right the ship before the season ends? And these next 3 games, I think, provide some hope after that.
So the first of those 3 at Tennessee. Tennessee will be, they're rebuilding, whether they want to admit it or not. The Ryan Tannehill show is over, and they've moved on by this point.
Really, they've got Will Levis and Malik Willis.
Yeah,
as their guys.
Will Levis.
So one of those guys.
Will Levis will be their starter by this point, which is, nice. You get to see a young player, but he is a little bit of a project. And I think that while he offers a much higher upside than Tannehill, he also offers the ability to make more mistakes. And I think that this gives Seattle just a fairly smooth win after a rough stretch.
Yeah, this is a rough roster. This is a team that has talent in a couple different positions. Running back, defensive tackle, a couple of up-and-coming defensive backs. But otherwise, this talent, this roster is getting a little older and lacks top-end talent at key positions. DeAndre Hopkins is their best wide receiver, and he's 34 years old. 32 anyway, 33. I think that, this is a win on the road. Seattle actually needs this win. After dropping 3 in a row, for both of us, they need this win. So I see them going and taking care of business. No problem.
Yep. The following week, at home, the final home game of the year at Pittsburgh. How do you have this one shaping up?
Steelers at Seahawks. Yeah, this is one of those games where this is again a well-coached team by anybody's standards. Tomlin's been there for years and years and years. One of the most tenured coaches in the NFL, and he always has his teams ready to play, like him or not. But it's on Kenny Pickett, right? Mitch Trubisky's not going to play. So it's Kenny Pickett's show. Kenny Pickett's shown that he can play quarterback in the NFL, but I think he's just a middling guy. He's a middling guy with middling athleticism and middling ability to win games. And you go look at him statistically, I bet at this point in the season, and he's got 3,600 yards, 20 touchdowns and 12 or 13 interceptions, kind of a guy. And that's what we're facing there. I just don't see them having an offense that can keep up with Seattle's well-oiled machine at this point in the season. And then their defense is okay. It's well-coached, and it's a decent defense. But, again, it's not something that's going to be able to slow Seattle down. So I got it as a win.
I have this as a loss, and I don't have a great reason for it. I just think that these are the types of games where Seattle shoots themselves in the foot one too many times, and they're a better team, but they let someone stick with them for too long, and it ends up biting them. And I don't have one of those games yet this year, and like I said, I don't have a great reason for it, but I do have that being what goes down here.
There's always one game like that every year.
Yep. So I have that one as a loss, and then the final game of the year
Thank goodness.
at Arizona. By this point, Arizona's shut everybody down. That they'll be running guys out there that aren't even on the roster now because they're fully into the Caleb Williams race, and so it becomes a very easy win where Seattle starters only play half the game.
This is one of the easiest tickets I've ever bought in my life.
Yeah,
is to this game. The seats were cheap. I mean, I'm on the 40-yard line, about halfway up on the 100 level, and I think the tickets cost me like $80 a piece. It was actually great, but it's going to be a horrible game. I just
Mm-hmm.
want to go because it's in my hometown now. Yeah, I've got this as a win, and thank goodness.
Yeah.
Finish the season with 3 wins in a row after 3 losses. You're right. Righted your ship. You're ready now to go into the playoffs.
See, I've got the team finishing the year 2-4 over the last 6 games, which is not a good look, especially for a team that started the season so good. But I think that has a lot to do with the schedule, and not that they're a team that's falling apart and whatever. I think they go into the playoffs as a team that can still make some noise. But I think they go in as a wild card team, and it becomes about missing Philadelphia and the 49ers in the first round. And if you can avoid those two, you win a playoff game and get yourself in a situation where, you're a couple of wins away from a Super Bowl, and
Yeah.
then who knows? So
Yeah. Interesting. I've got them at 12-5. So you've got them at 10-7. I've
yep.
finished the season 3 wins, 3 losses, 3 wins.
Mm-hmm.
And it reached 12-5. I'm not. I didn't allow the schedule to impact my wins and losses as much as what happened in your scenario. I'm hopeful that, and maybe it's an optimistic look at Seattle's schedule, starting the season 6-1, helped them mitigate the losses there in that tough stretch. And we'll see what happens. This to me could be a 10-win team, as you arrived at. This could definitely be something that's going to be, I'm not going to say the wheels come off, but it could. Like you're very, very close to wheels coming off the way that you finished.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Let me see if I can pull this this graphic up. I don't know. Let me see there's that graphic, but where are you? There we go. I don't know if everyone can see this, but this is as big as I can make it. So, yeah. So you've got 10. I've got 12. I like my result better than yours, but I get, yours is very realistic as far as what can happen in a season. I think mine's realistic as well as to what can go right. It'll be interesting to find out who is right in the end.
Yeah, we'll find out.
We'll find out. So share your thoughts out there, listeners and watchers. I'm very curious as to where everyone else ends up. I've seen some other predictions. We're all going at the same time as far as everyone that's out there either writing in a blog or doing podcasts is kind of doing their predictions. And I'm just very curious as to where the fans are, where everyone kind of feels that this team is at. I do believe this is a playoff team. I don't know that there's any question there. I think everyone that's kind of doing predictions is in that boat. But I think 10 wins to me is on the low side.
Yeah. Like I said, I wasn't shooting for a certain number when I was doing this. I wasn't even really keeping track of where I was as I was going. I just literally had the schedule out and just went through based on the team and just gut instinct, and then counted it up at the end. Have I been really thinking, okay, how good is this team, and trying to get a schedule that gets me to the win total that I believe they're going to get to? I would have had 11. I probably would have given them the win against Pitt. But my instinct said nope, so I didn't, and that's where we're at. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, it's hard to win in the NFL, and the difference between 10 wins and 12 wins is not much. It's a matter of making a field goal or getting a turnover or, stopping somebody at the goal line, or converting yourself, when you need to go win a game. And I think this team is special. I really do. I think this team is kind of coming together. It's ahead of schedule for me. as far as kind of a rebuild, and it really goes to where Gino's at. If Gino carries this team, has a great year again, surpasses some of the numbers he had last year, continues to play well in the second half of the season. The offensive line continues to play well. The defense kind of steps up a little bit. Maybe instead of allowing 26, 27 points a game, they allow 23 or 22. The offense, instead of scoring 26 or 27, scores closer to 30. This team could do some damage in the playoffs this year and get to that NFC Championship game. I think that's the threshold for me, is whether this team this year is successful. And that sounds crazy coming out of my mouth right now in September, but I would be disappointed if this team lost a wild card game or if it lost a divisional game. I think that this team has the ability, if you go through the roster, it has the ability to get to the NFC Championship game if everything kind of goes right. And that's a hard if, but if things go right, this team could get there.
Yep.
Okay, let's get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
You can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me on Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. You can find it on your favorite podcast platforms, YouTube channel, and hit that subscribe button when you do. So until next time,
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.